Hey there, listeners. Let me ask you a question. When was the last time you really prioritized your mental health? If life feels overwhelming, stressful, or just plain chaotic, I've got something that could truly make a difference. I want to introduce you to Aura, the #1 app for emotional wellness. Aura offers personalized mindfulness and mental health support that fits your life. Whether you're looking for guided meditations, soothing sleep sounds, life coaching, or breathwork exercises, Aura has something for everyone. The best part? It's tailored specifically to you. Aura learns your preferences and creates a daily routine that supports your unique emotional needs. Now, here's the exciting part. As part of my podcast family, Aura is giving you an exclusive 7-day free trial. That's a full week to explore their library of thousands of wellness tools and discover what works best for you. So take this opportunity to reset, recharge, and show up for yourself. Head to the link in the show notes right below wherever you're listening to this podcast to claim your 7-day free trial. Don't wait. Your mental wellness is worth it. Let Aura help you find peace, balance, and clarity right at your fingertips. Go ahead. Try it today. You deserve it. If you've ever felt like you're stuck in the same painful patterns, questioning why love feels so hard, or struggling to find the deep connection you know you deserve, there's something I want to share with you. The Inspired Love program is an 8-week journey designed to help you break free from toxic cycles, heal the wounds of your past, and prepare yourself to attract and sustain the conscious, fulfilling love that you've been searching for. This isn't just another course. It's a deeply personal experience that will reconnect you to your inherent worth, clear the barrier standing between you and love, and help you create a solid foundation for the healthy, conscious relationship you've always dreamed about. Together in a small and intimate group, we'll tackle the deepest fears and insecurities holding you back and emerge on the other side, free to live and love in alignment with your highest self. Our next journey begins soon, and space is limited to keep the group focused, supportive, and intimate. Whether you're single, recovering from heartbreak, or ready to heal and transform your current relationship, this program will give you the tools, guidance, and connection you need to rewrite your story and create the love you deserve. So don't wait. Love starts with you, and there's no better time than now to take this step. Tap the link in the show notes to learn more and claim your spot in this life-changing program. I want you to be part of this journey because you're worth it, and the love you desire is closer than you think. So let's do this together. Hey everybody, welcome to the Conscious Love Show. Whether you are single, you are in a relationship, or you're healing a broken heart, this show is here to inspire you, to remind you how beautiful, lovable, and amazing you truly are, and to give you the practical tools and insights to navigate from wherever you are right now to the loving relationship that you so deeply want to have. My name is Shane Kohler. I'm a certified transformational coach and trainer with over a decade experience helping people release their trauma and open their hearts to love. I've delivered seminars all over the world, coached thousands of people through my online platforms and programs, and every week I'm coming straight to you with the hottest insights and the best teachers around, bringing you powerful resources and profound conversations to heal your relationship with love, dating, and yourself. I'm so grateful you're here, and if it's your first time, welcome. You can count on me to always show up for you with my very best and a commitment to learn and grow myself so I can serve you to my maximum ability. Thanks so much for tuning into the show. I've got some awesome things planned for you today, so without further ado, let's dive in. All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Conscious Love Show podcast. My name is Shane Kohler. Pleasure to be on with you today. I'm looking forward to diving into another episode. Today, we are talking about the core mistakes of the feminine. And as we dive into this, I want to say we're not just talking about the mistakes women make, although a lot of the women who are listening may find this very relevant, may relate to this, especially if you tend to be a very feminine woman. But what we're really talking about are the pitfalls of unbalanced feminine energy. So the feminine energy has certain qualities. We're going to explore that today. The masculine energy has certain qualities. We're going to explore that today. And these two energies need each other for balance, right? And I think when we talk about like a healthy, conscious relationship, what we often have in that dynamic are a masculine dominant energy and a feminine dominant energy, and these two energies that complement each other in partnership. And I was just saying to my people on Instagram here before we got started today was that when you have a healthy internal balance of masculine, feminine energy, that tends to manifest as a healthy external balance of masculine, feminine energy. So you tend to have a partnership that reflects that balance that you have internally. And of course, it's not to say that a man always needs to be masculine in a relationship or a woman always needs to be feminine. There are times when we can switch back and forth, but often, I'd say like a lot of men really feel like a man when they're holding that masculine space. And a lot of women really feel like a woman when they're, surrendering into that feminine space. And relationships can be deeply fulfilling for both people when we respectively hold that space for each other. Not to say we would never, ever step out of those roles. But again, in terms of fulfillment, in terms of balance, there's a healthy balance we can achieve there. And when these energies are unbalanced, and rather than talking about in a relationship, I mean, when they're unbalanced in a relationship, that's when we generally feel unsafe and unheard and unwanted and all that kind of stuff. But when in an individual, when these energies are unbalanced, when the masculine is not balanced by the internal feminine, when the feminine is not balanced by the internal masculine, it becomes very problematic. And there are just a couple of things I want to just touch on around that is that, the masculine tends to be self-oriented. The feminine tends to be others oriented, right? So there's a way in which the feminine is very attentive to others, concerned with others. I mean, this is essential, right? Because the feminine is the mother. And if we want, like, children bond with their mother and the mother bonds with the child, and of course the father is involved. I'm not saying the father isn't involved, but that outward focused bond is part of what ensures survival of children. Right. So there's the feminine is naturally oriented to be outward focused, to be attentive to others' needs, to be nurturing, to be empathetic and compassionate. Those are all inherent qualities in the feminine, where the masculine is more self-focused, focused on providing, protecting, making sure the needs are met, making sure like it's a self-oriented energy, right? It's an action-oriented energy. So what do I need to do? How do I need to make it happen? And the masculine, without being balanced by the feminine, becomes selfish, self-centered, right? One of the greatest or most obvious global examples I've seen of this is how we've, kind of pillaged our planet for all its resources, and now we're in an environmental crisis, right? I think that's just a really great example of unbalanced masculine energy, right? The drive for industry and the drive for power and the drive for production, and that not being balanced by a sensitivity to what is outside of our self-interest has led to an environmental crisis. The feminine energy has the opposite problem. And that's really what I want to talk about today in this conversation, is that when that outward focus, that outward awareness, that attentiveness to others' needs is not balanced by a healthy self-interest, that becomes the core mistake of the feminine. And so the feminine is very oriented towards, in its unhealthy manifestations, is oriented towards people pleasing, is oriented towards finding external validation, is oriented towards not having a strong core of self, right? And constantly finding a sense of self in what she does or gains from others. Now, that's not all bad, right? There are healthy ways that shows up. I gave the example earlier of like her attentiveness to taking care of a child, and like that's what it's about, right? Evolutionarily speaking, that's largely why she is oriented in that way. It's not a bad thing, but when it's not balanced, it becomes fundamentally disempowering. And so I wanted to share this today. I was recently reading Jordan Peterson's new book. It's called Why We Wrestle with God. And what he's addressing in that book is the Bible stories from the Old Testament. And he's giving a really interesting perspective on these Bible stories, and not from a religious standpoint, but just from like a human consciousness standpoint. And I found some of his points really fascinating. But one of the things that I thought was really, really cool that he identified, and I mean, I've studied all the world's religions and relatively in depth with most of them, but I've never heard this take on the Garden of Eden story. And I thought it was really powerful, and it really highlights today's point where he talks about Eve accepting the apple from the serpent. And he says that her mistake in accepting the apple was believing that her compassion could be all encompassing, like believing that there was nobody or nothing that was outside the boundaries of her compassion. And I thought that was such an interesting perspective, because in my work, like I see, I work with a lot of women, and I see a lot of women inviting a lot of snakes into their lives, right? And some of you ladies out there can attest to this. You know what I'm talking about, right? Where we invite that snake into our lives, where the smooth talker, or the person who, probably we know they're a little bit dangerous, but we decide to take a chance on them, or believe that they could be changed, or they could be saved, or right there's that tendency to do that. And in the book, he talks about how the mistake of Eve in the garden was that she believed her compassion could be extended even to the serpent. And I think there's something highlighted in there. Now, I want to say, he also talks about in the book, and I thought this was really profound, is how Adam's mistake, and I think this is worth saying too, Adam's mistake was in sacrificing his own values and his relationship with God to impress the feminine. And not only that, but then when God comes into the garden and says, Adam, what did you do? He said it was her fault, right? So there's this, he sacrifices his own values and his own relationship with God in order to impress the feminine. And then when he gets called out on it, he says it was her fault, and it was your fault because you gave her to me. Right. So there's like this false arrogance in like sacrificing his own values, and then blaming her and blaming God for his inability to be a man, which I thought a little bit of a different topic, but I thought it was really cool how he laid out the story, and in that story, we're talking about kind of the core mistakes of the masculine and the feminine, right? Where the feminine is this all encompassing compassion, not seeing or recognizing that there are snakes in the world. There are serpents who are not deserving of that inclusiveness. And then the masculine is the arrogance, the selling out his values to impress the feminine, and then the arrogance and the unwillingness to take responsibility. But anyway, I digress. That's a little bit off topic. But what I really want to tune into is this profound insight that the feminine, when unbalanced by the masculine, and again, the masculine is the protector, right? So as a protector, the masculine is looking for the snakes of the world. Discernment is a masculine quality. That's not to say women don't have it, but when women exercise discernment, they exercise it from the masculine part of themselves. And discernment is a protective quality. Right? It's recognizing there are dangers in the world. There are serpents. There are snakes. There are things that are not to be included within the realm of my compassion. And when the feminine is unbalanced by the masculine, she extends her compassion even to where it is not warranted. And I think this is such an essential insight when we look at the patterns of relationships, and especially how our wounding gets involved, because we've got to recognize that we were brought up by snakes. Like really, like, and not to say that all our parents are snakes, but the world is full of snakes. The world is full of people and situations that will selfishly take advantage of us if we are not owning ourselves, owning our space, owning our energy. And we have been, and when I say we, I'm talking about all of us, men and women alike. We have been brought up in a world where that is, what do I want to say here? Where our selflessness can and will be used against us. And I don't say that to spread fear, because I think there are a lot of good people out there. I think the world, I think humanity at its core is fundamentally good. But we've got to recognize there's an imposter in human consciousness. And the imposter in human consciousness is the fear-based ego. And if you're familiar with my work, or you're familiar with many of the talks I've done or things like that, then we've got to recognize that this fear-based human ego is an imposter in the love that we are essentially made of. And I believe that human beings, we come from spirit, we come from God, we come from the foundational essence of the universe, which is fundamentally good and fundamentally loving. But in this human experience, where we experience separation, right? So we come in from infinite spirit, from infinite love. We come into this human experience. And this human experience is an experience of separation, right? This human experience is one where we are no longer completely unified. I'm over here and you're over there. And I have my own mind with my own thoughts and fears and judgments. And you have your own mind with your own thoughts and fears and judgments. And something that is inherent in separation is fear. Fear is inherent in separation because when you and I are separate and we're not unified, I don't know what you're going to do. I don't know what you're thinking. I don't know if you're going to hurt me or help me. I don't know what your intentions are. Not to say your intentions are bad, not to say all people's intentions are bad, but fear is a byproduct of that. You know, it's like, I often talk about it like this, where when we are in the womb of our mother, there is an immediate meeting of all of our needs. We are held safely. We are warm. We are fed. Like every need is met without us needing to ask, without us needing to work. Every need is immediately met. And all of that fundamentally changes at the moment of our birth. Right? At the moment of our birth, all of that fundamentally changes. Now, if I need something, I have to scream and cry for it and hope somebody can understand what I need. And so when we are born into this human experience, when we leave the infinite unity of the cosmos or whatever you want to call it, when we leave that infinite unity and we come into this human experience, all of a sudden, fear is a part of that. Am I going to be left alone? Am I going to get my needs met? Am I going to be cared for? And something, and this is what in my work I talk about as the emergence of the ego, is when there is when for the first time we experience a need that is not met. And maybe it's if, we were left in the crib to cry it out. And we want that warmth. We want to be held. We're crying for that. We're craving that, but that need is not being met. Or maybe it's when, we stop breastfeeding and we're given a bottle and we don't want the bottle, right? But whatever it is, like we're talking about so young, so early on in our lives. We go from having all needs met instantly, completely available without ever having to ask for anything, to now crying out and nobody necessarily being there. And this distorts our consciousness in a way. And then that gets built on throughout our lives, right? And I mean, like, think about how mean kids are in school. I mean, especially now. I mean, like when I was a kid, we didn't have like social media and stuff. But like, I mean, I look at what kids go through now with like the online bullying, and I mean, it's not that people are bad. It's not that kids are bad, but it's that everybody is living in this kind of fear. And I think even, if we want to go to the extreme of like narcissism or sociopathy or psychopathy, and I don't really like to talk about these things. A lot of coaches talk about these things. I don't really like to talk about them because I think it paints a bad picture of humanity, but it is a real thing. Let's just say that it is a real thing. And, we tend to look at the narcissist or the sociopath as like, a perpetrator. But when you look at these kinds of personalities, right, what you inevitably find is it stems from fundamental trauma. I mean, they talk about how like sociopathy or psychopathy is often a result of not being held as a baby. Right? When babies weren't held by their mothers or by somebody, when they didn't receive that physical contact, they as a survival adaptation created an antisocial personality. That was the only way they could have survived it. And so the core of humanity, the essence of life, is fundamentally good. I strongly believe that. But I also think it's a crazy world we live in. And the goodness that we are gets distorted. And so there is a need. There is an essential need to practice discernment. And if we talk about it in the context of romantic love, where most of us, especially if you're listening to this conversation, you're probably in a partnership with someone or you're looking for a life partner. We're talking about inviting someone into your life in the most intimate ways. Right? We're talking about inviting someone into your life on the most intimate levels where they would live in your home. They would have the closest possible proximity to your physical body. They would be exposed to all of your private moments and your deepest emotions. And this is like, it takes, like, that's got to be someone special. And I don't even love the word special, but like that's got to be a particular kind of person when you choose to partner with them like that. And when we look at the core wounding of the feminine, and so let's talk about that for a moment. The core wounding of the feminine, I often talk about, is the need to be chosen. Now, the core wounding of the masculine would be more like over independence. Because, and this is the way we're trained, right? Where little boys are taught to be tough and strong and emotionless and stoic and don't cry. But little girls are kind of taught the opposite, right? They're taught to be relational in nature. And such is the nature of, where like the masculine would go off to war. And that would be like, he would need to be tough. He would need to be strong. He would need to have a suppression of his emotions because he can't be crying on the battlefield. Right. Whereas the woman would maybe stay home with the tribe. And I'm talking about like tribal societies, like where we come from, evolutionarily speaking. But the women might stay home with the tribe and they might care for the children and they might do these kinds of things. And so they would need to be selfless. Whereas the masculine or the men would need to be selfish, right? Like they need to focus on their own survival. And so this is like in the big picture where we come from. This is what's in our collective consciousness on an archetypal level. And as evolved as we might think we are in this modern world, we haven't really come that far from that. And there's still this image of what a man is, and there's still this image of what a woman is. And of course, there are people who cross those borders all the times, which I'm all for. Be whoever you want to be. I think it's great. But it doesn't change the fact that even when they're crossing the borders of that, they're crossing the known borders that we all kind of socially agree are there. And I say all of this to say that while the masculine wound is an inability to deeply connect, it's kind of an isolation in independence. The feminine wound is actually the exact opposite. It's an inability to be independent. It's the feeling that when I am not chosen by another, or when I am not accepted or loved by another, I don't even exist. Like my existence needs to be validated by the being seen and accepted and loved by someone else. Now, of course, there are men who feel this way. I'm not saying there are men who don't. And there are women who have the ultra independence going on, right? So we're talking about energy here. We're not talking about individual people or gender. But a lot of men fall on the one side, a lot of women fall on the other. This core wound of needing to be chosen, it stems from, so if you resonate with that right now, if you resonate with the idea that your core wound, or at least one of your core wounds, is in the need to be chosen, that without being seen and accepted and loved by someone else, your existence lacks validity, right? That I can only exist as a person or as a woman if I'm chosen by a man or loved by a man or some version of that. If you resonate with that, then you have to recognize that identity or that experience of yourself has not come from a holistic place. Because when women, or we could even say young girls, are empowered in childhood and are raised in a powerful manner, they're also trained in developing some masculine qualities. That doesn't mean that she, as an adult woman, would be masculine. She might be very, very feminine, but she has access to her masculine qualities. And what do I mean by that? I mean an ability to be independent, an ability to be discerning, an ability to be assertive. Right? These are masculine qualities. These are the qualities that actually empower the feminine gifts. The kind of inclusiveness, the empathy, the nurturing, the compassion, which are truly the gifts that the feminine offers. And by the way, are beautiful gifts. Like, I mean, there is not a man out there who doesn't desire in the deepest depths of his soul to experience all of that from a woman. It's fundamental to who we are. Right? Like these are incredible gifts. They're incredibly powerful. Like a lot of women, I don't think, realize that when those gifts are expressed appropriately, in the right time, in the right place, with the right man, how it could completely change his life and call forth like an utter devotion. I think a lot of women take for granted how powerful those gifts actually are. Which actually leads directly to the point that I'm talking about today. Because of that core wound, that need to be chosen, that need to have my existence be validated by something external to myself, by the love, the acceptance, of someone else. Because that core wound comes from a childhood where she was not trained to develop her own masculine strength. Those gifts that she offers, the inclusiveness, the empathy, the compassion, those gifts that she offers become distorted, and they become the things that she uses to try to gain approval from others. Right? So when that core wound is there, that need to be chosen, that need to be accepted, that need to have her existence be externally validated. When that core wound, I don't want to say is there, because maybe we all have that to some degree, but not just when it's there, but when it is the driving force or the driving factor, her gifts become reduced to the things that she uses to try to prove herself. And they get given away without discernment to the wrong people, places, and things. And I think what makes this even more of a trap is when that wound is the driving force, she is inclined to select people who validate that wound, who reflect that wound. So when I said this, if some of you read the post that went up this morning, I talked a little bit about this. How when that wound, the need to be chosen, is the driving factor, she's actually not looking for someone who would choose her, but she's looking to play out the cycle of striving to be chosen. Now that might sound really strange at a face value, right? It's like, if my core need, my core wound is that I need to be chosen, then wouldn't I want to find someone who would choose me? Like, logically, that would make sense. But we've got to look at the underlying pattern and where that comes from, because that need to be chosen comes from a life where she has never been chosen. Right? And maybe it was with her father. Maybe it was with the kids at school, or with the boys that she had a crush on, or wherever it might have been in her life. But that pattern, it didn't originate from a life where she was constantly chosen, where she was constantly validated, where she was accepted, right? Had that been her norm, she wouldn't have this core wound. It wouldn't show up like this intense need. Because had that been her norm, she would experience that like a given in her life. Like, of course I'll be chosen. And so it wouldn't have the intense emotion behind it. It wouldn't be related to the fear. Of course I'll be chosen. And so it becomes a non-issue. But when that wound, when that fear is the driving force, it's coming from a repetitive cycle throughout her life of feeling like she doesn't get chosen. And this doesn't mean that nobody has ever chosen in her life, but it means her internal narrative, the way that she narrates her life to herself, is that she feels that she's never been chosen, or that she never gets chosen, or that she's so close and then it falls apart. And this happens over and over and over and over and over again. And so what she's actually unconsciously wanting to create in her life is not the experience of being chosen, because that would be unfamiliar, that would be uncomfortable. Let me put it this way. If she were to be truly chosen by someone, being in the intimacy of truly being chosen and choosing someone else, the depth of intimacy of that would shine a light on everything that she believes is within her, that she unconsciously thinks are the reasons that she's not being chosen. That might sound a little confusing. Let me see if I can clarify it. When someone goes their whole life with the narrative that I don't get chosen, right? When that has become the persistent internal storyline through which they explain their life to themselves. And this could be a man or a woman. I'm framing it in the feminine because this is generally a feminine wound, but this can happen to men too. But when she goes through her life and her experiences have shown up for her in such a way where she internalizes her life narrative in that I don't get chosen, people don't choose me, which becomes like the core driving wound, the core need that drives her. Underneath that, she assumes, either consciously or unconsciously, there must be a reason that I'm not being chosen. There must be something wrong with me. Because if there wasn't something wrong with me, I would be chosen. Right? Is this making sense? If there wasn't something wrong with me, I would be chosen. So because I'm not being chosen, there must be something wrong with me. Now, I want to be clear. I'm not saying there's actually something wrong with her. I don't think there's really anything wrong with any of us. We're all fucked up, wonderful humans, and that's just the nature of being human, right? Like there's nothing fundamentally wrong with any of us. We all have variations of all kinds of stuff. But the internal narrative is there's something wrong with me. I'm not enough of this. I'm not enough of that. I'm not attractive enough. I'm not strong enough. I'm not independent enough. I'm not confident enough. I'm not pretty enough. I'm not whatever. And in this narrative, right, when the underlying narrative is I don't get chosen, when someone actually does choose her, when someone is like, I see you, I love you, you're wonderful, what that does is it becomes very uncomfortable because she's like, they're looking right at me. They're going to see all that stuff that's wrong with me. Right? They're looking right at me. They're going to see me. I don't want them to see me because I don't want them to see what's wrong with me. I don't want them to see all the things that I've been working so hard to hide from everyone my whole life. And this is why the core wound of not being chosen or the need of constantly striving to be chosen never actually leads to being chosen. Because she's not looking for a dynamic where someone would actually choose her. She's looking for a dynamic where she can strive to be chosen. And so she subtly tunes in to men, or again, men can do this too. So it could be a woman or it could be anyone. But she subtly tunes into somebody who is going to play that game with her. And she knows, whether she's aware of it or not, she knows exactly what this looks like because she's been doing it her whole life. Again, maybe it started with her father. Maybe it was the boys in school, but whoever it was, she's been tuning into that her whole life. She knows exactly what it looks like. She knows exactly what it feels like. And the dynamic that makes her feel most like herself is not when someone chooses her and she chooses them in return, but it's when she is living in the striving and the hope that if I'm good enough, if I can show that I'm good enough, one day I'll be chosen. Not today, not right now, but if I can show that I'm good enough, one day I'll be chosen. And what she doesn't realize is she set the whole game up to where that one day will never actually come. And you might ask, why would someone do this to themselves, right? Like, why would someone do this? It doesn't make any sense. Like, if you want to be chosen, why wouldn't you just find someone who chooses you and choose each other? Well, that would make sense, but human beings, unless, and like, I want to say this isn't like, we can change this, right? This isn't a fixed truth of our existence. Like, this is all changeable. But human beings without awareness and conscious work will always default to what's comfortable and familiar. So if there's a pattern that we've been playing out throughout our lives, until we become very aware of that pattern and make conscious work to change that pattern, and I'll talk a little bit about what that conscious work looks like, we're just going to keep living out that pattern. So we'll keep choosing people who don't choose us. We'll keep striving to prove ourselves. And we'll live under the illusion that if I just try hard enough, if I just do enough, if I just show how great I am, one day someone will choose me. One day I'll get where I want to go. I want to know if anyone has ever observed this dynamic. So like largely what we're talking about here can fall into the camp of anxious attachment, right? And a lot of you who are listening today probably will identify, I tend to be an anxiously attached person. Have you ever noticed that when an anxiously attached person ends up in a secure relationship, they become avoidant? It's the most baffling thing, right? The moment an anxiously attached person ends up in a secure relationship, all of a sudden they become avoidant. It's like the pendulum has to swing to the other side. And why does that happen? Because the intimacy of secure love is uncomfortable. You see, it's comfortable to chase love. Of course, like there are these ups and downs, right? Like, oh, I get excited and then I get let down, and then I get excited and then I get let down, and I fall in love and then I get disappointed, and I try really hard and I think it's going to happen and then it doesn't. And there's this like up and down cycle. And we think that on the downs we're unhappy, and we think that on the ups we're happy. We don't realize we're not happy in any of it. It's all miserable. It's this constant roller coaster, and it sucks no matter how you look at it. But the reason we stay in that cycle is because it's familiar, it's comfortable. And even when I'm up and even when I'm down, none of it exceeds what I'm comfortable and what I'm willing to be with. So when I end up in a relationship with a secure person, and all of a sudden they're like, I love you, I want to be with you, like you're my one, I want to be dedicated. You're like, whoa, hold on. I don't know if I want all this. This seems like a lot. Because the game was never about finding love. The game was about chasing love. So I think I've illustrated this point pretty well at this point. But what I want to bring it back to, and then I'm going to talk about some of the steps towards healing. But what I want to bring it back to is this: is that this all-encompassing compassion, empathy, nurturing of the feminine, right? It is the same energy that she gives to her child to raise a healthy, integrated child, right? I really want to highlight how sacred this gift is. The greatest mistake the feminine makes is undervaluing this gift and giving it away in trying to prove herself, rather than discerning who deserves to receive it. And so, like, we could say the feminine is kind of this unconditional compassion. We've got to learn to put some conditions on it. Like, when you partner with someone, when you choose them for life, yes, they get to receive your unconditional compassion. No matter what they do, no matter how much they fuck up, no matter how much you see their humanness, no matter how much they might fail at times, they get to receive that unconditional compassion. But it's because despite their humanness, despite their failures, despite their mistakes, they have shown the devotion that warrants that uncondition, that lack of condition on the compassion. And so the mistake is giving that away. Oh yeah, you're hot and I want your approval. So I'm going to give you my unconditional love and dedication. That's the greatest mistake. And those who are anxiously attached, those who are, I use anxiously attached as kind of a catch-all, but those who are driven by that wound of needing to be chosen by someone, it's going to be very, very difficult to not give that away in the hopes of having someone choose you. Right. So for those who really feel like I'm speaking to you right now, for those who, if you feel like this conversation is for you, this is what I want you to imagine. I want you to imagine that person, whoever that might be. There might be someone in your life right now that you feel this way about, or maybe you think of a past someone, maybe there's an ex, or maybe you're going through a breakup right now and you're kind of craving that person's approval. But I want you to imagine your relationship with that person being like oh, we'll see. We'll see. I don't know. Right? Like, not this like, oh my God, I want you, but like, we'll see. The willingness to let go, the willingness to be like, even strong in terms of like, hey, this is what I need from you. And if you can't bring this, I don't think this is going to work. Like, imagine you have a great date with someone, or maybe a few great dates, right? And there's connection, and you're like, oh, like, wow, I really like this person. This is exactly the kind of person I'm looking for. They're attractive and they're smart and they're witty and they're funny and they got all the tickets. This is exactly the kind of person I want to be with. And maybe you go on a few dates with them and you're hitting it off. And then they say, I'll call you tomorrow. And then they don't call. Now, a lot of people at this point would go from one extreme to the other, right? The first extreme would be like, they didn't call, screw them, I'm out. And we could say that would be like the extreme masculine approach, right? They didn't call, screw them, I'm done, leaning into hyper independence. I don't need them, I don't need anything. And then there could be the extreme feminine approach. Why didn't you call? Did I do something wrong? Don't you like me? What happened? How can I get you back? What do I need to do to make it up? Right? Now, both of these are imbalanced. What the healthy approach would be, I've often said it like this: send them a text message and say, you didn't call. Not why didn't you call? No, you're acknowledging you said you were going to call and you didn't. Like, hey, I was waiting for your call last night. You didn't call. What happened? And people are like, oh my God, that makes me look so desperate. Like I was waiting for their call. It's okay to say you were waiting for their call, right? To acknowledge that you were waiting for their call is a healthy feminine expression. It's acknowledging the interdependence of relationship. It's acknowledging the genuine interest in the relationship, right? I was waiting for your call. I didn't hear from you. What happened? That is a healthy feminine, the interdependence, the longing for connection, the desire to connect, the vulnerability of you said you were going to do something and I put my trust in you and I was waiting for you to do it. But then it needs to be balanced with the masculine, the strength, the assertiveness, the self-certainty that says, look, I really like you and we've had some great time together. I'm like, I really would like to see this go somewhere. But you telling me you're going to call and not doing it, that's like a deal breaker for me. Like, I want you to know how serious this is. I'm not going to entertain a relationship with anybody who treats me like that. And I'm going to ask if we continue seeing each other that when you tell me you're going to do something, you're going to do it. Or at least you send me a text and say, hey, I know I said I was going to call. I got really caught up at work. I'm exhausted. Can we catch up tomorrow? Right? At least that. I hope I'm giving a good description of the balanced approach here. This is what we need to step into to create conscious love. And truthfully, the same goes for men and women. Like, I think I think men and women both do this. We vacillate from one extreme to the other. We vacillate from the extreme masculine to the extreme feminine. A lot of women would be like, if he doesn't call me, I'll never talk to him again. Well, that's an extreme masculine response. A lot of men would do the opposite. And a lot of men would isolate. I'm never going to screw that. I'm never talking to her again. And a lot of women would start pining and fawning and trying to prove themselves. The gift of who you are is not for everyone. As I said in the beginning, a lot of snakes in the world. And we don't need to hate the snakes. We don't need to judge the snakes. You see, I think one of the other kind of toxic things we do is we hate on toxic people. Oh, that was my narc ex and they just did that. Well, like, rather than judging your narc ex or talking shit about your narc ex, why don't you examine the parts of yourself that chose them in the first place? Now, that's a tough one. But I'm just being real with you. They are who they are. The world is full of them. That one will be followed by 10 others if you keep accepting and allowing that into your life. You see, we don't need to hate the toxic people of the world. All we need to do is discern who they are. And not allow them into our lives. And toxic is even a strong word. Like, We not only need to guard ourselves against toxic people, we need to guard ourselves against incompatible people. Hey, look, I'm looking for a certain kind of relationship. You work 80 hours a week and are so exhausted in your free time that you can't show up to like plan regular dates and like spend some quality time together. I don't hate you for it, but this is not compatible. And I'm not going to wait around and keep showing you all of my gifts and keep giving you the best of me, hoping that you're going to prioritize me above your 80 hours at work. I'm just going to say, hey, you've got priorities that aren't compatible with me. Balancing that feminine longing for connection, that feminine interdependence, with a strong masculine assertiveness, clarity, discernment. And it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. Every single individual needs both. So I want to just give, just have a few more minutes. I want to just give a few suggestions on the actual healing process, right? Like how do we heal these patterns? And it ultimately comes down to getting comfortable with the discomfort. No matter how you look at it, right? Like there's a really destructive narrative that's so pervasive in our world right now that is like, we should just seek happiness all the time. We should just seek pleasure all the time. If it feels good, it's good. If it feels bad, it's bad. I recently read a book called Dopamine Nation. I would recommend this book for everyone. It's entertaining. It's not the most entertaining book I've ever read, but it is powerful because it talks about this pleasure chasing culture and how it literally fucks up our brain. Like we are so chasing pleasure, whether we do it through social media, like this addiction to our phones, whether we do it through porn, whether we do it through drugs, whether we do it through alcohol, whether we do it through relationships. Like I see so many people in my work that are love addicted, right? Which is really that cycle I was talking about earlier, right? Where we chase and chase and chase, but we never get anywhere. Like, I don't think we realize the detrimental effect that chasing pleasure and happiness has on our brain and body. It's so destructive. And like, you look at it this way, evolutionarily speaking, where we come from, like if you imagine yourself in a tribe of hunter-gatherers, I should do a whole episode on this because it's a bigger conversation. But if you imagine yourself in a tribe of hunter-gatherers, right? Like you would have to exert so much effort for a small reward, right? Like you imagine like hunting for days to get one animal or something like that. Something to that equivalent. Like the amount of effort to reward ratio would be so immense. And this is how we're biologically designed as human beings. And now we've created a world where we can get maximum reward with minimal effort. Just turn on a video game or turn on some porn or turn on social media. And all of a sudden I'm getting maximal reward for minimal effort. And this is literally destroying our brain and body. Like sometimes people come to me and they're like, I'm not attracted to anyone. Well, one of the reasons, if that's you feel like you're never attracted to anyone, I would check in like, how much are you chasing different forms of pleasure? Because it can get to the point where we exhaust our brain of the ability to produce dopamine, and therefore we never get excited about anybody. We never get excited about anything. If you're like doom scrolling on social media all the time, your brain is probably depleted of dopamine. Now, I digress. That's a little bit of a different conversation. But my point in saying that is that the reason we chase pleasure in that way is to avoid pain. Right? The reason we doom scroll on social media, or we lose ourselves in a video game, or we lose ourselves in porn, or we lose ourselves to a drug, the reason we do that is because there is something uncomfortable in my experience that doom scrolling on Instagram distracts me from. Right? When I am, if we go back to the context of relationships, when I am chasing love with someone and I'm ruminating about them and I'm preoccupied about them and I'm like, are they going to call me? Are they not? What are they doing? Are they with someone else? Right? We're all in our head about that. That cycle of being caught up with that person is distracting me from an existential discomfort that I feel in my life. And so what we need to do is start leaning into that discomfort. Now, if you're on the anxious side, right, the side that's chasing love, then that might look like, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put my phone down. I'm going to go for a 3-hour hike and not have access to my phone. Right? Or I'm going to make myself not text them, not call them. I'm going to wait for them to get back, and I'm going to really bring attention to what I'm feeling and what it feels like. And I'm going to get used to holding these emotions in my body. Now, if you're on the avoidance side, or as I spoke about earlier, somebody who's anxious and then gets into a secure relationship and suddenly becomes avoidant, because they're really two sides of the same coin. The avoidance side of it would be, I'm going to sit in the experience of intimacy with this person. I'm going to reveal myself. I'm going to let them see the parts of me that I usually hide from people. And I'm going to take big, deep breaths. And if they walk away and leave me because of it, well, at least I know that I was my whole self. And I'm going to open up the possibility for someone to truly see me and love me for who I am. In either case, no matter how you look at it, whether you're on one extreme or the other, in either case, what we're dealing with is leaning out of the pleasure and into the pain. This is why, I don't do ice plunges right now because I went out there this morning. My tub is frozen solid. So I'm not doing ice plunges right now, but I regularly do ice plunges, and it makes me feel amazing for hours. Right. And there's same thing with exercise, same thing with anytime you are enforcing pain on yourself. Now, within reason. All right. I'm not talking about cutting yourself or leaning into some kind of destructive behavior. But when you lean onto the pain side of the spectrum, you actually increase your capacity for pleasure. Right? There's this pattern in the brain. Again, I should do a whole episode on this. But when you're constantly chasing pleasure, you actually deplete your brain's ability to experience pleasure. When you choose to forego pleasure and lean into pain, again, that could be emotional discomfort, that could be physical discomfort, like sitting in an ice plunge. But when you choose to forego pleasure and lean into pain, you increase your body's ability to experience pleasure naturally. And so what I want to say is, I want to make this really practical. Bring attention to what it is that you're avoiding. What's the thing that you are trying not to let happen right now? If you're caught up in some kind of relationship cycle with someone and you're like, oh my God, I can't lose them, I'm going to challenge you to lose them. That's my challenge. Lose that person. Now, it doesn't mean you're going to actually lose them. They actually might fall in love with you if you really do this, right? But what I'm saying is, all the structures and the control and the protection and everything that you've been doing to try to prevent losing them, drop it. This person's been kind of distant with me and I've been bending over backwards to try to please them and make sure they like me. Like, stop it. Call them out. Be like, hey, you know what? Like, I feel like I've really been showing up for you and giving you my best. And you've been a little distant with me. And I just want to know, like, is this something you're actually into? Or like, what are we doing here? Lean into that pain, lean into that discomfort, lean into that fear of rejection. That person might go like, holy shit, nobody has ever called me out on this before. Like, will you marry me? Right? Like, not that they would marry you right away, but my point is that they're going to be like, oh my God, like, wow, I want this kind of honesty. You might show them something they've never seen before. Or they might also be like, well, like, you were cool and now you're being heavy. Like, I don't need to deal with this. And then you do lose them. And what you realize is like, holy shit, here I was giving my best to someone who really couldn't give a fuck either way. And then you let that sink in. And if that happens, I want you to really feel the pain of that. Like, really let yourself feel what it feels like to give your best to someone who doesn't give a fuck. And when you really allow yourself to feel the pain of that, what's going to happen is there's going to be something that changes inside of you that it's like, I don't want to continue hurting myself like this. It's no longer about whether they're going to hurt you or not. It's, I don't want to continue hurting myself like this. And that's the place we got to get to. All right. So I want to say thank you for everybody for being in today's conversation with me. This is a fun one. We talked about a lot. I feel like we jumped around from quite a few different topics, but I think, we touched on some powerful things here. And I do just want to say, I mentioned it earlier, but I want to circle back to it. I am starting soon an 8-week cycle of my Inspired Love process. And this is a process where we work very closely together over a period of 8 weeks. We go into the core wounds, the origin of them. We start to identify, what are the core wounds that you're operating from? Where did those wounds come from? What is the identity that you created throughout your life? And then as a result of that, how has that played out in your life? What are the patterns that you've adopted as a result of that identity? And then what we're going to do is we're going to work very closely together, go through processes of somatic release, somatic healing, where we actually work the energy out of the body. We're going to powerfully reframe all of this in a way that orients you in the best possible way for the future. And talk about like the practical tools and skills that you need as you go forward. It's a powerful process. I can't tell you how many people have created incredibly loving relationships as a result of going through this process. So many. I'd say like probably the majority of my past students are now in like healthy, loving relationships. And it's beyond that. And this is what I hear most, because I don't always follow up with everyone and hear the whole end of their story. But this is what I hear most from people, is that whether or not they end up in a healthy relationship, which again, often comes for them, but whether or not they end up in a healthy relationship right away, what I hear is that their need for that relationship is no longer there. Like, they become free of the incessant, obsessive need to be loved by somebody else. And they start to fall in love with themselves and the life they're living right now. And like, my goal when I run this program, my goal is that. Because here's what I know. You live your life like that, it's only a matter of time until someone sees you living that life and they're like, I want to be part of that with you. Happens every time. Like, the relationship is a done deal as soon as you get to that place. My goal is to get you to that place. And that's what this program is about. In a matter of 8 weeks, we can take you from wherever you are right now to that place. And don't be surprised if over the course of that 8 weeks, you find someone amazing and hit it off and start a really awesome relationship. Because that happens so often. So thank you everybody for being with me in today's conversation. Always a pleasure to be on here. I hope you found it powerful. I hope you found it insightful. It's one of the highlights of my week. If you can't always tune in live here, new episodes are uploaded every Wednesday on the podcast. Subscribe on Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts most. Thank you so much for being here. Big love and blessings to all of you. I'll be back here live next Tuesday. This episode will be uploaded tomorrow if you're just tuning in with us. Love, blessings, everybody, and I'll see you back here next week. Take care. Bye. Thanks again for checking out the show. Please subscribe on whatever platform you listen to podcasts on the most. And I would love it so much if you'd leave a review and tell people what you think of us. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram @TheLivingRelationship to connect more closely. And I'm grateful to be supporting you on your journey to love.